Hi, everybody. Welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am speaking with Leta Greene about forgiveness. And as you all know from some of the other talks, forgiveness is a huge part of healing from your trauma. But forgiveness can get sticky. So we're going to talk about getting unstuck in expectations and finding joy. Before we dive in, though, let's talk about Leta, learn a little bit about her. As a trucker's daughter, Leta Greene learned many useful skills like how to do plumbing, car repair, and of course, that led her, as all her siblings did, to pick a trade, and she became a makeup artist. Makes perfect sense, right? She became the confidant to women. We all struggle with the same things. That led to her first book, How to Embrace Your Inner Hotness, which is a book on self-perception and confidence, and being the safe place for so many, and then including the Me Too movement, led her to her second book, Love Me Too, and it's about finding fulfillment. It's about finding a fulfilling life after sexual abuse.
I made that a tongue twister on purpose. No, I'm just teasing.
Thank you so much. Her books have sold over 40,000 copies. She's working on her third book about living joyfully after grief. She has 3 cats. She's given 3 TEDx talks and has 3 kids. So her favorite number must be 3, except she only has 1 husband because Mr. Greene is her favorite. So welcome, Leta. I cracked up when I read your bio.
Thank you. And then just to show what a cat lady I am, my cat's walking by. So
yeah, I've got a couple running around here too. So you might see him in the background or something.
Yes, we all need something to cuddle, right? So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this summit. This is a very important topic, and it's a tough topic. Forgiving ourselves is the biggest thing before we can forgive anybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many messages on there about how we're supposed to do it and the timelines. And I want to give the listeners the opportunity to recognize that their journey is their journey. And we don't shame ourselves into a timeline. We don't shame ourselves into a certain course of action. So just because, you know, you've done this and I've done this, there's other people that have done that, it takes time. And that's okay.
Absolutely. It's taken me years, 30 some odd years to embrace the concept of forgiveness, for one, to figure out how it works, how it looks, how it feels, and then to be able to forgive myself. I'm not even worried about those who have caused harm and stuff against me. I'm focused on forgiving myself. So yeah, it absolutely takes time.
Yep, absolutely. So it's, you know, whenever you're talking about sticky things, right, which is one of my favorite words, people have all these layers from their culture, from their family, from religion, which I'm a member of a religion. I'm not here to bash religion, but we get all of these different ideas and we think we're supposed to be there now. And with everything worth having, it's a process.
Absolutely. I mean, we get told well, your journey should take this long and you should be going through all these steps and you should be doing this, that, and the other. And you know what? You can should all day long. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Absolutely. I'm like, should, you know,
right.
And a lot of times when I think people, they're doing it from a place of ego, meaning I've been there, I did this, and whenever we're using ego, really we're covering up where we really are.
Yeah.
You know, if we're the person who walks in the room and I'm the most important person in this room, really we're covering up our insecurities, right? And if we do it from that place of ego, or we do it from that place of not understanding someone else, that we're like, you should be doing this, because really what's happening here is I'm so uncomfortable with this trauma that you've been through that I need you to not make me uncomfortable by let's just moving on beyond it. So, you know, you should be over it by now, kind of thing. And there are certain things in life that, for whatever good or bad, some people are going to be like, oh, why is she saying this? But it will always be there. It'll just be there in a different way. So we're never going to get over it. We're never going to forget. This is not the Matrix. So sorry. We don't get to take an orange or yellow pill or whatever color pill it was, right? We don't just get over it. It's something that's there, but you're able to use it in a powerful way.
There's a like a cartoon that I've seen where they have a small jar and they have your trauma, it, you know, like a big rock, and it goes in the jar, and it pretty much fills the jar. And it's not that the rock gets smaller, we just get a bigger jar. So
Yeah.
basically we grow around our trauma. It doesn't go away, it doesn't get
Yeah.
smaller, we just grow around it.
Which leads to the concept of empathy, right? That we do a lot of what we do in life because of what we've experienced, which made us grow as people and grow in our ability to impact. And if we'd never had these kinds of experiences, why would we be doing this? Why would we be qualified to be doing it? Right? So we grew in empathy and experience, and ultimately that's what we take with us.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about forgiveness. I mean, it's like you said, it's such a sticky area. You know, where do we even begin with forgiving ourselves? And what do we forgive ourselves for?
Well, this is one of the analogies that I use for it. If I were standing in the street and somebody came up and threw a bunch of poop on me, and because I have the humor of a fifth grader, I talk about poop a lot, right? So we could go chasing after the offender that threw the poop on us, and we're going to chase after them. And as we're doing that, poop is falling off all around us. And of course, that's falling off on the people that are following us, that are trying to support us. It's falling off into everywhere we might go in our life as we're trying to chase down this offender, and to recognize that it's just unfair. I do not believe that we have to actually forgive ourselves because we're not the ones who caused it. We only have to forgive ourselves when we caused it. And it doesn't matter what we were dressed like. I mean, I was always told what a little flirt I was, so that's why. And so for a long time, because I was molested from 2.5 to 14, for a long time, I really tried to keep, men at a distance and be really careful, when my very personality, which our personalities are, molded by, 3 years old. And my love language, if you've read that book, is physical touch. I like touch. I like to be cuddled. I like to have my hand held. I love my husband put his arm around me when he's sitting next to me. And so trying to weed out my personality made me feel even more conflicted. Where one of the things that I've done now is people that are unkind to me don't get the right to hug me. I don't pretend. I don't do the social hug. Right? So I have very, very firm physical boundaries. So this idea that you have to forgive yourself for the actions of someone else is allowing them to still have room in your life, is allowing their trauma, their choices, their poop, and you're carrying it around like it's some kind of precious thing that you have to cherish, when we only have to deal with our own poop. And so let's say a young woman or a young man, and I like to always include men because men are assaulted as well. Absolutely. And boys are assaulted, was in a bar drinking, not maybe, wasn't in control of themselves as much as they would have normally been, dressed in an enticing manner. They are not to blame for that, because they didn't go to the bar with the intention of, I hope I get assaulted. So again, same kind of scenario, man or woman walking down the street, pulled into a motel room by someone that could physically overpower them. They didn't walk down there going, I wonder which door's gonna be a problem on The Price is Right. They didn't have that. So one of the ways that I think our brains try to protect us from trauma is to let us think that we're in control. So for example, this is one of the ways that shame comes from outside of those who've experienced these kinds of things. Well, I don't drink, so that would never happen to me. Or a tsunami happens and you're like, oh, I don't live where tsunamis happen, so at least I'm not so dumb to build my house where tsunamis happen, right? It even as simple as, I get a ticket, and I show up at the party and I'm like, oh my heavens, I was late. I got a ticket, speeding. And our brains like to correlate things. So everyone else starts to remember the last time they got a ticket, right? Or the feelings they had when they got a ticket, right? So that's what our brains do, is they connect things. And this is where sympathy goes awry. They're like, oh, I totally know how you feel. My cat died. Yeah, totally same thing when it's your grandma you just buried or your child, right? It's like, no, not quite the same thing. But that's the correlation of connecting that our brains make. And so that when people are trying to forgive themselves, really they're falling into that false belief that they're in control, that somehow they controlled this or manifested this or created this, when they didn't. That was completely the choices of someone else. They did not show up in that scenario. I didn't sit on my uncle's lap because I thought someday he's going to molest me. No, I was a 2.5-year-old girl who should have been protected. It had nothing to do with my personality, that I didn't keep my legs together as well as I should have, right? I mean, all these stupid things that we put on people, right? It's simply the fault of the brain correlating. Well, I would have been better at this, says the person who's shaming us, right? And the false idea that we are in control of the events of our lives. We are only in control of our reaction. And the younger you get, the less in control of that reaction you are, because you don't have your frontal lobe formed.
That is probably one of the most interesting perspectives on forgiveness I have ever heard.
I have more.
I'm sure. Does it come with more food? What about the feelings that we get after we've been, assaulted or whatever it is that has happened? We have the shame, we have the guilt, we have the self-blame. Don't we need to forgive ourselves for those feelings?
I believe that it's a blend of science and emotion. So knowing what your brain is doing, it's really helpful to study psychology, study the brain chemistry, study the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, right? To understand that we overfixate. That is what your brain does, because it's trying to say, how could I have prevented this? How could I have done something better? It's what your brain's trying to do so it can learn. And so recognizing, okay, did I cause this? Like just taking this higher up view, looking at it like, an eagle from above, right? I did not want that to happen. I did not know that was going to happen. That was not something that I planned out. Therefore, I'm not responsible for this. So whenever those feelings come up, those poopy feelings, because again, you asked for the poop, we all have poop. Everybody poops. It's actually a problem if you don't poop, right?
Right.
It's what you do with it. So when those feelings come up, I have an imaginary, colander, like the kind you move your pasta out in, that I put up on my head. And when my thought comes up, I'm like, hello, thought. And it's like, are you here to make me be awesome? And it gives all excuses and it's whining. And then I'm like, bing, let it go. And then I focus on the thoughts that are there to help me be awesome, that are there to help me grow, that are there to help me thrive. The ones that are just full of excuses and whining, emotions come and go. It's a misfiring of the brain, really. Right? The emotion of love. You're madly in love and then they do something irritating. So how do people stay married for 40, 50 years? Is because they married a perfect
each
person.
other.
Is they learn to fall back in love again and again and again. And to look at the little things that are irritating and go, it's okay. I can deal with that. Look, they refocus, they learn where to focus. And I really dislike this concept that's so prevalent of, this is just how I feel, or just accept me the way I am. No, your feelings can change. They will change many, many times in a day. So you get to choose which feelings to focus on. So the feelings of shame, have a conversation with shame. Put it over here on the couch next to you. Have a conversation with it. Are you valid? Do I really have ownership over you? Right? What would you say if shame were sitting next to you? And typically you find out that, one, the exercise of putting it outside of you, and two, having a conversation with it, you realize how much it lies.
Yeah.
And enough conversations in, and then talking to hope, and talking to happiness, and talking to empowerment, and talking to, right? The list can go on. And just having more conversations with those individuals than the poopy individuals.
Hmm.
But it's okay that you have it, because everybody
Right.
poops. Everybody. These feelings are going to come up every single day. So I just put them outside of me. I ask it if it has reason to be there. And if it doesn't, I set it on the couch and we have a little debrief.
Okay.
So is that kind of weird?
No.
You're like, okay.
No, not at all. Actually, it makes me think of the movie Inside Out, which is one of my favorite movies. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I highly suggest you do. It's a really cute movie. It's a kids movie, but it talks about our emotions, and it has our emotions as people. And that's exactly what I was thinking. Was like, okay, I'm picturing all my emotions as these characters and having conversations with them.
Yeah, I actually did this as a child, and in all truth, what happened to me as a child did lead to a nervous breakdown. And so I think in a lot of ways that ended up being a gift, because
Mm-hmm.
I had this almost out of my mind, well, literally out of my mind experience, right? And that I could choose to come back in it. And I had to choose the heart of that, because it was so much easier to live in this fantasy world that my young brain had created to cope with everything that was happening, because I was dealing with different forms of abuse as well. And so I had a psychotic break. And it wasn't until I was like, in my 20s that I was like, oh my heavens, what? And then this whole new thing starts to come on, this whole new question of, am I broken? Am I right? No, it was actually gave me a coping skill. It was what literally my brain did that to say, this is too much for you, little girl. And that's okay. And let me remake myself. Right. And so in order to forgive, we have to recognize that it really isn't about us.
Yeah.
And
And
in religious circles, we talk about how freedom is, how forgiveness is really freedom for the victim. And you're like, how is that? It's because you're releasing that person from
mm-hmm.
you having any connection with them. And you're just letting God handle it, or the universe. I believe in God, but whatever your belief system is,
Mm-hmm.
you're just letting God handle that. And the tie between the two of you, your need to have them be accountable. Yeah, but just have a separate part of your brain that handles that part. But when you're laying in bed at night, you're like, I have no attachment to this person.
Mm-hmm.
And if we did have an attachment to them, well, they violated our trust. And I believe that anyone who expects us to pretend like everything is okay with someone who has violated us in any way are not safe people. And so in my
Right.
book, I actually go over how to distinguish who are safe and not safe people. And I have my most intimate circle is very safe, that I can share things with, and they'll call me on my crap, right? But they'll also hold me in my despair.
Right.
So if people can't do both of those things, they're not safe.
So where do we find the joy in all of this?
Well, you feed those emotions. There's a Native American story, and I don't know which tribe, but I love it so much. And the chief asked the people, he says, okay, what wolf is stronger? He's got two wolves that are fighting, the wolf of war, hate, vengeance, and the war of love, and the wolf of love, peace, right? All the good things. And
Mm-hmm.
so the people have this big discussion going back and forth. Which one's stronger? Love or hate? Which one? And they go back and forth, back and forth. And finally they just come to the chief and they're like, we don't know. And he said, whichever one you feed. And this is why I love the principle of prayer or meditation, because it's a time that we get away from the busy, right? And if you have PTSD, which a lot of people in this field do, their brains have this little searing path, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
just deflects to that. And the way you can repair that is by creating new pathways in our brain. And how do you create new pathways? Same way you create a new path in the forest. You hack at the weeds, you pull at the branches, and you dig in the trench. So creating new pathways of focusing on, what am I to learn from this? And it's not about shame, right? I'm more resilient than I think I am. And then focusing on look at that sweet little flower. Look at that, how it found life in this little crag between the rocks. If that flower can find life, how much more who has a brain, me, who has a soul, right? How much more can I find life, joyful, living, profound life, and really sitting down and having long conversations with those ideas, the simple little things, the feel of cleaning a dish and how your hand feels as it comes out of the water. I mean, that simple. Really focusing on those things will not only remake a pathway in your brain, but it becomes a habit. And this is not a 30 days to a habit kind of thing, right? That's like learning how to brush your teeth better. This might be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 year process of learning how to make a habit around dismissing and embracing, dismissing and embracing those different thoughts, and not building all this whole entire conversation around false ideas. What is really true? Were you responsible? No, you were not. 100%, 100%. And I mean this in every case, that of the perpetrator. Every case. It's their fault. Unless she went up to somebody and said, "Oh, I want to have sex." Oh, wait, that's consensual. That's not rape. It's a completely different thing. And even if you said stop at one point, you just became non-consensual.
Exactly.
And sex is more about than just consent. It's about the meeting of two souls. And we can have, right? I mean, there's just so many layers, because when our bodies are molested, our mind and our heart and our soul were molested too. And it's not just consenting with your body, it's your heart and your soul. And moving forward and forgiving yourself if you were with somebody who you didn't love and who took advantage, who you loved, and then they took advantage of you. You know, that doesn't, you know what I'm saying? There's just so many different layers that you have to go through, and you have to give yourself the time to do that. But it is 100% the fault of the person who violated you.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Just figure out what is true and take the time to do that, and just do the prayer, do the meditation, dig your trench in happiness on that side of the battle, and happiness will flow away from you. You got to bring it back, right? And all these feelings change for good and for bad. The feelings alter and move around and are sporadic. But as you make a habit of what you choose to let have real estate in your head, the stage of your mind, then eventually you start to recognize not only the patterns in yourself, but the patterns in others. And this is really handy, because you start to realize when somebody's trying to poop in your area.
Right. And you can put a stop to it pretty quick.
Because you're learning and you're growing and you're becoming more savvy. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you're on a first date with somebody, you start to see some warning signs of them being a controller. You're like, wait a minute, the boyfriend that violated me or the girlfriend that violated me had the same behavior. So you're going to go try to fix this person? No, you're going to be like, hey, not for me.
Yep, absolutely.
And that is where the empowerment from these experiences come. Don't confuse the need to forgive yourself with the value of a lesson.
Interesting. That makes sense. That makes total, absolute, perfect sense.
Right. And forgiveness is something that when you find out who's responsible, it will fall into place. And anytime I call it the voice of he who is poopy, because he wants everything to stink, right? But our brains naturally are 83% negative.
Yeah.
Right? They are naturally negative, is to help us not fall off the cliff or whatever ancient caveman needed, right? And it takes millions of years for brains to evolve, and right? It takes a long time. And so recognizing this is just a thought. It's just a thought. It doesn't make it true. It's just a feeling. And putting it in its place. And I have visual exercises that I go into of how I do that, several of which, and we don't have time to go over today, but more than happy to have more conversations, but it's whatever exercise works for you to put things outside of you to dismiss that will become empowering, and it'll make you incredibly, incredibly resilient and empowering to be able to help other people. Because when you see someone else who's been victimized, talk about mama bear, right?
Mhm.
You have the ability to fight and have those punches land because you know what to do. But if you're
Right.
sitting there shaming yourself, staying in this broken place, that is the second, third, fourth, fifth levels of that event or events that happened to you, the victimization that happened to you, right? And you are allowing them to keep messing with, they messed with your body, and now you're allowing them to mess with your soul. If that doesn't tick you off, notice what strong language I use, poop and tick,
Mhm.
right? I know it's kind of shocking for people. That shouldn't
Telling you.
make you mad. That's part of the grieving process, right? The anger, you put that anger on, how dare you allow them to be in your head anymore? And how dare, like, no, right? And realize that you're in control of what happens in your head. And that's why I hate these phrases of just accept me the way I am. No, because we get to grow. That is the gift of being a human animal, because we are the only animal with a brain that has the ability to act beyond instinct.
Mhm.
We're the only one.
Leta, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today. This has been
Well,
awesome.
thank you. I really hope to help people and to give people a shortened path of agony than what I went through. And I would like to say that whatever your belief system in he who was awesome or she who was awesome, that has been a major source of healing for me, to realize that there are things that are just bigger and harder than my ability to have all the answers. So I just give them to someone who I believe can handle that.
Let it go. Yep.
And that's okay.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us in this session. We'll definitely talk to you in one of the other sessions.
Thank you, Tracy.